So if you sat down with a lot of old Montreal Canadiens fans like me, over the age of 50, especially us in the media, if you bring up these two words, it might draw a lot of either scorn or controversy or saying he was never given a chance. So we're going to talk today about someone that's been polarizing my family of Habs fans for years, Philip Myre. Now, Philip Louis Myre was born November 1st, 1948. The goalie played a grand total of 14 seasons in NHL. Now, he was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, 5th overall in the very strong 1966 draft. Now, he had great statistics in the Quebec Junior Hockey League, especially with the Shawinigan Bruins, where he had 38 wins and 6 losses in 44 games, and a very strong 8-4 record in the playoffs, the Q League playoffs, and 11-4 in the Memorial Cup. Now, he later went on to the OHA juniors, the OHA Niagara Falls Flyers, again a very great affiliated team with Montreal, with 2 seasons. And not too often a player of his talent would skate 5 seasons in the junior league, because back then you could play 5 years major junior in 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Now, he was sent to Montreal's affiliate in Houston for seasoning in 1969, but eventually ended up with the big club when the number 1 starter, Roger Vachon, got injured. Now, he played 30 regular season games in his 71 season after getting a drink of water with Montreal with a 4-3-2 record in 1970. Now, in those 30 games, he won 13, lost 11, didn't play in the playoffs because Roger Vachon and Philip Myre were replaced for the playoffs by Kenny Dryden, and Myre dressed actually for 70 games. He was the constant number 2 for Montreal, and like I said, Dryden took his role. 172 season came along. He ended up with being sent over to expansion Atlanta Flames, because he only played 9 games as a backup and 72 with a 4-5 record. Now, Atlanta Flames, who also had Dan Bouchard in their tandem, he had a very consistent career actually with Atlanta, helped him to several playoffs. His goalie average was probably for an expansion team one of the better ones, and a lot of people claim he was the guy that allowed Atlanta to get in those playoffs, because a lot of the key games he had some very successful results. 78 season, unfortunately, Atlanta was making changes. He was sent over to St. Louis, who was struggling at the time. 78-79 season, he had probably one of his worst years with only 9 wins in 39 games. But his talent and his presence in the on the bench and in the dressing room was seen to be an asset to the Flyers. And in 1980, where the team made it to the Stanley Cup Finals that year, he had an 18-7-15 record in the regular season and a very impressive 5-1 record in the playoffs. Now, the Flyers allowed Myre to go on to the Rockies the next year, but he had some really, really bad results with Colorado. 82 season, which also saw him being sent to the minors. He played 24 games with only 2 victories, with a terrible 5.35 goals against average. So he was a consistent backup. He eventually ended up in Buffalo with a last cup of coffee, stayed in the AHL for a while for Rochester with 2 seasons. But he also had some World Canada team experience playing with their 81 World Championship team. Now, after Myre ended his career, he ended up being a goaltending coach for the Kings, Detroit Red Wings, and the Florida Panthers. Now, in my basic opinion, let's look at this just in generalities, ladies and gentlemen. So you had in the pike for the goalies of Montreal, you had Charlie Hodge, Denis Desjardins, Phil Myre, Roger Vachon, Ken Dryden, all these. You had Michel Plas Wayne Thomas. Within 8 or 9 years, they had nearly 10 goalies that were in the Montreal system. The fight was who's going to be number one and who's going to be the backup. Now, when Michel Bonnet-Rock became the official backup, I think they were trying, what Sam Pollock wanted to do, is concentrate on Dryden after all these goalie movements were finalized. And they were also thinking ahead, who would be a number two that could be a number one? Phil Myre could never be a number one in Montreal. He was like he wasn't as good as Brian Hayward. The only number two that was close enough to be a number one for Montreal was Brian Hayward. And we talked about Brian before in the previous podcast. But Philip Myre, for what he was, I mean, to play with all those teams and to help a lot of young players. So overall, 439 games in the NHL, 149 wins, 198 losses, which is deceptive because he played most of those losses with Colorado and St. Louis at the end of his career. 76 ties, official goal against average of 3.53. Again, Philip Myre, it's always the question, who was the threesome in Montreal when Ken Dryden showed up? Everybody talks about Rogie Vachon, but Rogie Vachon would never be a backup in Montreal. He wouldn't accept that. He needed to be a number one who could play 50 games. But they were hoping that Dryden could play 60, Larocque could play 20, 25, and that's what he had. But Philip Myre, like I said, from what I heard, he's a nice gentleman, but just say he was a numbers game. If you have 7 starters for the Yankees, and you got Guidry, and you got Gullett, and you got Catfish Hunter, and you got Ed Figueroa or whatever, if you can't pitch in the bullpen, and back, remember the Yankees had Sparky Lyle and, Goose Gossage. If you're a number 7 starter with the Yankees, you could be traded to Cleveland or Toronto or, end up with the Seattle Mariners. I mean, you can't have 2 backups. And Phil Myre couldn't be the backup in Montreal that he wanted because he wanted somebody who was a lot more consistent. Phil Myre would rarely play in the road, which was, tough for Montreal. So you got to have a backup be able to play in the road. Anyway, have a good afternoon. Bye.